Going live any moment now. Just waiting to see the moment that the stream. Okay, yep. Hey, everybody. Yeah, it's live on YouTube now.
Glorious.
Hey,
Hello.
everybody. How are y'all doing? Yeah, so not really going to. I don't know. This last week's stream wasn't too disastrous. It's just there were a lot of technical problems. We felt like we wanted to do something, fun and stupid to make up for it if anybody was put off by it. And I don't know. Yeah, I could have probably my commentary could have been better, but I understand like what the issue was there, and I'm not really gonna get into it here. But yeah, that I had a bunch of shit going on in the background that I needed to get sorted out. Anyway, so in order to make up for it, and also to make it so our regularly scheduled streams are back,
Irregularly
being
scheduled.
scheduled on. Yeah, back to being scheduled around Sunday, or at least when they happen, we're trying to make them happen on Sundays. They're not really scheduled. We're not making that fucking mistake again. Just to clarify. But anyway, we figured something fun that we could do that was stupid and you guys might enjoy would be for us to reveal to you one of our one of the pleasures, one of the guilty pleasures that we've developed over the last couple of years at the back alley, and that is the content of a man named Tariq Nasheed. Heretic, you want to talk about him?
Well, the basic idea is that he is a black nationalist, one of those people that genuinely believes that not only like this goes farther than just thinking that there should be a black only nation state because as I'm sure you're aware there's quite a lot of those. But that
No.
I'm getting to the fun part. But that the
Yeah.
entire history of the world and the entire development of human civilization from the very beginning up until today is the direct result of black people doing things, traveling the world, introducing things like science, technology, philosophy, culture, music, basically everything that differentiates human civilization from group from herds or groups
Hey,
of
Heretic.
animals. Sorry.
Your mic has a bit of an echo on the stream.
Oh shoot. Okay. How do I fix that?
I guess just turn it down for a bit. Just turn it down.
Okay, let's try that. All right. I might need to speak up some though.
All right.
All right. Am I echoing now?
You sound good. You sound good.
Okay, good. So
Uh, go
Any,
ahead.
yeah, anyways, so basically everything that differentiates human society from any other kind of social group that exists among animals is credited exclusively and entirely to black people. And therefore, the only reason that black people in their existing countries and in modernity that they're in a bad situation is a result solely of bad humans attempting to inflict their malcontent, their malevolence, they're just being bad people onto them through the means of racism, colonialism, etc.
And also, he does not distinguish between different like ethnic groups in the way that like they actually would be divided up geographically and how they emerge geographically. He thinks of them literally like the Family Guy color swatches meme, where it's just black people and then white people, and that's the only and then that's the only thing that distinguishes them. And there's a behavior that's predetermined that's associated with it. And it's, and if that's not that's not absurd enough, and the way Heretic is characterizing his perspective, that's really being charitable. Like, we'll see in some of the material of theirs that we watch that he quite literally and openly just states that black people need to do a genocide, at least in some. But anyway,
I wanted
so you want to.
I wanted to be as neutral as I could in my description of it, so that I don't risk poisoning the well, as it were. Because trust me, this is
Well,
going to be. I'm not accusing you of poisoning the well. I just want to I want to spoil as little of the interesting takes that Tariq Nasheed and his friends put forward in this. I want to say documentary style, but I really put documentary in air quotes here.
It's not. It's just like random interviews with black identitarians or just random celebrities vaguely talking about racism. It not like not in any particular order, and as a result there isn't a coherent narrative created. But yeah, it's just some of the takes in this series of movies, and the reason why I'm not really describing any particular one. There's 7 movies in this documentary series, and the reason why I'm not ascribing this to any particular one is because every single one of them is exactly like this. But yeah, Tariq Nasheed. If you're not familiar and you haven't seen any of their content before, imagine Andrew Tate as a proponent of the Nation of Islam. That's a good way of a good thing to imagine that you should set your expectations towards, because that's essentially what you're getting.
Yep, all the way up to the
And
UFO
that's
taking them away to Wakanda, I guess. Where's the Nation of
I
Islam
think
UFO taking them to again? I actually don't
I'm
remember.
not even I'm not even being we're barely being facetious. Some of the people that are interviewed here, that is actually like what their take that's actually what their takes are like. It is incredible.
There's a
And it's presented like it's just like all of the other takes. And yeah, we're not going to get copyright struck. I mean, this is literally just on YouTube.
yeah, pretty
I mean,
much.
maybe, but whatever. I guess we're kind of testing our luck anyway, just like responding to this movie in the way that we are. So I kind of don't care, to be perfectly honest. I just wanted to do something fun.
Yeah,
But
there is one thing I
and
wanted to.
before, oh,
Sorry.
okay, go ahead, go ahead.
There was one thing I wanted to remark on in regards to black identity being this monolith. I can't help but recall that the European identity, insofar as there is one, is divided into multiple distinct ethnic groups that can be readily identified relatively quickly. You have, of course, the Brit
Yeah,
Bonders, you have the Germanics, you have the Nordics, you have the Croates, I think that's how you pronounce it, the Slavs, and several others, including the people
yeah.
in the
There's
Balkan who are just getting ready to kill each other over what brand of cigarettes they smoke. That's not even a
and there's
joke, by the way.
hundreds
But the,
and there's hundreds in Africa, so it's even more ridiculous in
but
the case of Pan Africanism.
and yeah, and then it's just like I contrast that. I was just bringing that up to contrast that with black identitarianism, which is just like your identity is black. That's all. You are black. You are not you're not from Mali. You are not a descendant of the Zulu tribe. You are not from this tribe. You're not Ethiopian. You're black. I
I
just
mean,
can't help but think
honestly,
like
as
this
a
is a like for Black History Month, this is a real disservice to black people because it kind of just lumps them all into this great monolith.
I mean, it only really matters within the internal logic of political ideology, specifically of an identitarian bent. But before we started the movie, because there's basically no other way that this would get brought up for it to be context relevant, and it's one of the most amazing things I've ever heard. Apparently, and anybody watching the stream right now, you can look this up right now to confirm this for yourselves. Apparently, Tariq Nasheed's wife is named Peanut. that's, that's that's what she's called at least.
It's
She, her nickname or whatever is fucking Peanut.
I I I mean it's a very I've always enjoyed the naming
Peanut
conventions
Nasheed.
of I've always enjoyed the naming conventions of certain demographics in this country because they're always so interesting and so avant-garde. Sometimes you end up with names that are ordinary and conventional, and sometimes you end up with things that are just so creative that you just got to take a step back and just wonder, wow, what's going to happen with that kid? What are they going to be like when they grow up? What's their experience in
But
government schools going to
imagine,
be like if your name is Peanut?
imagine the domestic environment where someone in the with their fucking spouse is like it's where it's normal for him to call out, "Hey, Peanut, come here, hey, Peanut." That's why it's so goddamn funny. I know, like, it's such an unattractive thing to call your girlfriend.
I mean, pet names
What
are a
the fuck?
thing, I guess. But I mean, like that's kind of the name like you literally call your pet, like your dog or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, with the way the freaking. I'm not exactly sure if Tariq Nasheed is necessarily associated with Nation of Islam. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, but that Hotep crowd in general, that really is like the sort of mentality they treat, so they promote. So wouldn't surprise me. But
Eh,
anyway, you want to get started.
yep, we haven't even started yet,
I
and we're already
mean,
like 11 minutes in.
we're
So let's.
talking. I mean, we're talking. One last thing I wanted to say is just okay. So can I establish one thing? Like, can we get this to be a clip that floats around? A serious question people ask themselves. Like, I can respect whatever name you want to go by and whatever your sense of identity is, but can we not take like laughing necessarily as an insult? Because I think we've established in the case of fucking Peanut Nasheed that it's fuck it's, it's fucking possible to come up with one that's literally not possible for me to say without laughing. And but I'm sure that she's a fine person, but
Well,
yeah, like
just
I'm not trying to be insulting, but can that be established? If your name is ridiculous enough that it's literally not possible for me to for someone to say it without laughing, then that's not considered insulting.
I
That's
mean,
not considered like disrespecting identity to make fun of it.
well, counterpoint. I'm pretty sure the baby a decade ago named hashtag was white.
Hashtag. Oh my
Counterpoint.
god.
What the hell?
There's somebody there's
Counterpoint.
somebody named it. All right, go on.
What's the name of Elon Musk's son?
I think it was like yeah, it was Ash. I think that's how it's pronounced, but the symbol is it's like a symbol that represents it. It's pronounced that way.
Point is, like,
So it's like
we laugh at.
freaking literally named his son formerly the fetus in Elon Musk's wife's womb, basically.
The fetus, or the baby formerly known as fetus.
Formerly known as fetus, yeah.
We laugh at these names because they're funny, not because we dislike any person in particular. If you came at us and introduced yourself, if you came at us and introduced yourself as, "Hello, my name is Watermeloniqua," I'm gonna laugh. I'm sure you're a fine person, but your name is funny.
I'm laughing in the case of Elon Musk's kid because that actually sounds like something you'd do. Yes, I'm going to call you formerly known as fetus. But it's represented as this symbol that can't be pronounced.
That's the clip right there. Elon Musk's son, the baby formerly known as fetus.
But anyway, we really gotta get started with this movie.
I'm starting now. That was the fastest intro I've ever seen.
Every channel and realize they full of shit. I had to do something.
I had to rewind like 1 second because this really comes across as self-aggrandizing to me. He made this movie, and as part of his intro, he quotes himself.
I'm sorry. Well, I was listening to the stream because I'm having a hard time following the documentary and the call, because is there some way you could play it through Discord as well, so I can hear it?
And
not a... Alright, that's fine. I can just fucking play it alongside you on YouTube. But yeah, anyway, Tariq Nasheed was watching Ancient Aliens and felt like he had to do something when he saw their terrible misinformation. And that's where this movie came from.
Well, I mean, according to the Spirit Science channel, the pyramids were built by handsome Squidward, who teleported them into our world from the top down.
That was one of the best things ever.
And then Tariq Nasheed saw that and was just like, well, what about all the black people? Why were they teleporting the pyramids?
Tariq Nasheed did it a decade earlier, and it was about black people specifically.
Anyways, let's go ahead and get into this for real.
And by the way, if anybody in chat was curious about my response to Heretic's question, just let me know what it was, and I'll respond to it.
Anyways.
Sorry about that.
When other people tell their history, they come across as being patriotic. When other people talk about where they came from and who they are and what their history is, that's called patriotism. But when African Americans do it, or when black people do it, they're labeled as being militant. They're called rebels. They're called Afrocentric. So that's the big difference. Our history, for some reason, it becomes offensive to people. So we have to stop being afraid to tell what our true history is.
You hear that? Aboriginals are Africans.
You're just trying to describe your narrative of history, but when I say that all black people are basically the same, people get offended for some reason.
In other words, you just agree. You're just reverse white supremacists.
It's the black identitarian who's sitting here saying, "Hey, all these black people are mad that we're lumping them all into the same group, and like, why are they being racist?" And that's the response. It's how crazy this belief system is. The response, the only way they can comprehend it is that they're being racist against black people as like racial double agents. That's seriously how they fucking think. There's articles following that reasoning about like uh black white supremacists and fake black people. It's incredible that this is mainstream in the state's propaganda model.
Is it mainstream? Because admittedly, I don't like. Admittedly, I
Yeah,
don't see it a lot in. I don't see a lot of mainstream media for obvious reasons. Because I don't want to
there's like
become
Washington
insane. But
there's like Washington Post articles that were promoting that narrative.
and I do know that there was the what's it called, the 1617 project or something. So
1619, I think.
yeah, that's probably it. The idea was that oh, the United States of America was actually originally founded in 1619 because that's when black people were first enslaved, and just trying to create a narrative about American history that's basically entirely the history of black people existing in the United States.
Yeah, that is absurd because it creates a sort of historicist narrative, first of all, which is a problem in and of itself because there isn't a singular narrative that exists independent of perception, because narratives can't exist because meaning can't exist independent of perception, and perception requires, an individual person interacting and with information and internalizing something. But yeah, just digressing, the other absurd part about it is that it tries to claim that the US government's political economy is defined by slavery, which is I could fucking make an entire stream in and of itself about how ridiculous that is. But that would sort of require getting into the role of the Bank of England in the War of Independence, which is going to be full of hot takes in and of itself. So I'm not going to for right now. But it's literally just Hotep garbage trying to be legitimized as an actual historical narrative that people are intended to take seriously. It's literally like black identitarian Twitter ramblings.
I'm just
As
thinking.
far as, sorry, what were you gonna say?
I'm just silently hoping that they do get their way and they start teaching this in government schools, just so it becomes more and more obvious that what's being taught in government schools is absolute nonsense.
Yeah, well, I mean that's kind of already the case considering politically correct science, and well, by that I mean the methods promoted by academia are actively hostile towards the techniques people are actually using in studying new areas, new fields that people are actually interested in.
And JC Armitage, I'm tabbed away from the video. I'm looking at chat right now. Obviously, we will not be able to debunk the entire video in one stream, though we do intend to, over the course of these small breaks we take from our normal stream content, we will be chipping away at it over time. So this one in particular, maybe we'll get to 30 minutes, maybe.
Yeah, well, honestly, this was just going to be a series responding to the Tariq Nasheed movies, because Tariq Nasheed is a guilty pleasure of mine. Just because, and you'll see as we get into this why it's incredible that more people don't talk about this guy. Seriously,
Anyways, let's keep going.
The studies
yeah.
will show that the dominant population here in America especially, and in Europe, have wanted to claim everything for themselves. And so they have made up a lot of stories as they travel to places. And as we know, all of the places that the so-called European or the white explorers traveled, when they got there, black people were already there. Some kind of black people, or yellow people, or red people, or brown people. You as a black man.
You hear that? If you're not white, you're black.
Yes. And that's my favorite part about most like Hotep narratives about society, is that they imply very subtly that white people all secretly know that these, like, they're actively participating in plots to specifically keep black people in the dark about these, like, actual plans that would have consequences for economic coordination within economic models and how the political economy operates. There's just these massive active conspiracies that all white people are secretly in on. We're just not telling black people about. That's what I love about it. It's like actually schizophrenic.
I swear I've heard this exact narrative before about people who are engaged in a conspiracy against racial groups and whose membership within the conspiracy can be identified purely by their race. Where have I heard that before? I mean, it can't be, the white nationalist narrative in regards to Jews, can it?
I mean, you've also heard it before because it's basically the CIA's role in the narrative of society, one with influencing machine schizophrenia would have. Just instead of just replace racial consciousness with the CIA or whatever the influencing machine is in that delusion, and it's the exact same narrative of society.
Now I'm actually looking this up right now. Someone in chat mentioned Nasheed Compliance Engine.
Oh yeah, that's
it's not as
to a tweet.
I didn't come up. What I came up with is not
made.
as what I came up with is not as interesting as it sounds. But yeah, go ahead and explain the compliance engine.
Referencing. Yeah, I know what he's referencing. So around the time that Buck Breaking came out, because that's probably the movie. If you're familiar with anything Tariq Nasheed's put out, it's probably Buck Breaking. But around the time that Buck Breaking came out, Tariq Nasheed went on his Twitter account and he made a tweet where he posted just a picture of the very first dildo that was invented, and he said this is called the Negro Compliance Engine, and it was used on plantations on unruly blacks to keep them in line.
I found it.
And it's like, and it's like, you're saying that on an industrialized scale, white people were ass raping black people just because they could.
Apparently.
And just nobody ever talks about it because, again, we all know about it and we're just keeping them in the dark. Wink, wink.
Naturally. And I have to show this on stream. So this is the tweet we were referring to.
Yeah. There it is.
I don't know if this is appropriate for stream or not. I don't care.
It should be fine. It was so powerful it could cripple or kill. And fucked him literally to death.
I gotta get rid of that. Okay, it's gone now.
That was and, and literally that was unprompted. He didn't have to. He didn't have to do that. That just came out of nowhere, and that's my favorite part about most of these like Hotep Twitter posts is that they're just completely unprompted and they're just the most absurd, amazing things. Okay, people
This,
want us to
yeah,
Grandpa wants us to get on with the movie, and yeah, we have been laughing about stupid shit for a bit. Let's get on with it.
Are the root of all of the civilizations. Every body they've ever found, every tomb they've ever raided, whatever it was, they found something symbolic of the black man. Either our features, your nose, your mouth, your head, the way we looked, our hair, even braids, everything.
The makeup of a human being's self-esteem, self-image, and self-concept is not only based upon one's family history, but it's also based upon one's racial history. So when you look at
We didn't
the self
find a black man. We found something that is like something that would be associated with the black man.
it had human features. It must be a black
so
man.
Yeah.
Even though that,
That way,
even though that image they show was clearly of a Pacific Islander.
Well, keep in
Oops,
mind how
sorry.
they're defining how. Keep in mind what they're considering a black person to be in this case. We're going by Family Guy color swatches meme standards.
Pretty much. And besides that woman that they showed earlier introducing this topic, honestly, she could probably, if you change her clothes around, she could probably pass for an Arab.
She could pass for the queen from A Bug's Life.
Oh, I haven't watched A Bug's Life in a long time, so I actually don't know what you're referring to.
The old queen ant from that movie. She looks exactly like that character. Anybody who looks that up now and compares them side by side, you're gonna laugh. Because you fucking are gonna fucking see right away I'm right.
Anyways, let's get on with it.
of black people and black children, you can rest assured that at least 50% of how high or how low it is contingent upon positive information that they know or don't know about who they have been in racial history.
And over the last, I would say, 1,000 years.
Wait a minute, did I hear that right? I need to go back a little.
Positive information that they know or don't know about who they have been in racial history.
Whether or not you perceive yourself to have any value as a person is dependent on whether or not you have racial pride. It's based on the color of your skin.
How much
If you
pride you
don't
have?
see that as
How?
if you don't see that as the basis of your self-worth, then you're basically not a person. Oh, that's totally not projection.
Now, what part of any of that would be out of place with something you would hear from David Duke, or any other like white supremacist?
I love how it's like I'm not even exaggerating. He didn't phrase it that way, but logically, if you deconstruct what he just stated in an abstract context, he basically just said that you should base your sense of identity and value you perceive in it on the color of your skin. He literally just said that, basically.
Yeah.
Because and like don't even try to argue with me about like ethnic history or whatever, because remember, in the context of this movie, we're going by Family Guy color swatches standards, so
And I'm looking at comments right now. So far, this film looks like something InfoWars would make. Actually, no. I think Alex Jones has enough sense not to make something quite this unhinged.
and then I remember seeing there's There's reviews, I think, on the Amazon page underneath Buck Breaking, like the sort of people that actually watch these documentaries. There's a review I think you could see right now of some guy holding a picture of it with like a 5-year-old, and he's like, "Yo, I'm gonna show my son this movie and to show him what's really going on with the gays."
I'm gonna be honest. I really don't know if I want to review Buck Breaking on the stream because
I
it's like, don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, it's absolutely hilarious, but it's also like, as far as like thinly veiled fetishes go, this is like so thin you could probably cut a razor blade in half with it, edge on the edge.
Yeah, but we straight up, there are several parts of Buck Breaking I'm pretty sure we couldn't show on YouTube because they would instantly get us a fucking community guideline strike for it, but goddamn do I wish we could. Anyway,
The
want
move,
to get back
yeah, just
want to get back to the funny but not YouTube safe funny movie we can watch.
sure, in honor of Black History Month. Let's go.
1,000 years, there has been a protracted effort and an ongoing effort by those in power, the European powers especially, to make sure that what we have done as an indigenous, or what we call autochthonous peoples, Earth's autochthonous peoples, is erased irrevocably from the minds of all our people.
Only a people who haven't learned how to respect themselves will let someone suggest themselves that they forget about their history.
If you know yourself, there's no way that any...
What the hell did she say? I'm backtracking again because I didn't catch anything she said.
Basically, white people hate themselves, and that's why all white people hate all black people.
Let's
That's basically what.
Only a people who haven't learned how to respect themselves will let someone suggest themselves that they forget about their history.
Could that also apply to black people, though, who were taught not to respect themselves and are therefore applying it to others?
Well, and that's exactly the point. These people are, like, so goddamn insane that they're, like, in trying to describe empathizing with other people. Like, that's just what's happening here. I think that this is just genuinely them trying to look at, to understand and emulate how other people look at the world. And in doing so, they think, like, that all white people hate all black people, and that's how they think of it. Like there's fucking white cadres and black cadres patrolling the streets and secretly spying on each other, and like it's a fucking military operation that's just quietly going on and nobody talks about it.
Well, they
It's
do
such an
exist. They're just called the
insane view of
police.
world. Yeah, but just that this emerges organically out of society just because of the fact people have different colors of skin from one another, and that literally is the way they frame it. Like I'm not putting it that way. It's them.
Anyways, let's keep going. I want to make a witty remark, but I also know it'd be too spicy for YouTube.
If you know yourself, there's no way that anybody could ever
The risk
do
we
the things to you.
we
Or would
undertook
you do the
when
things to you,
deciding
of
to
course,
respond to
that
these
we find
movies.
ourselves doing. So that, and in many ways, I don't really think it's hidden. It's there. It's just that they're not allowing us to understand.
Now that last guy, this guy,
Yeah.
I'm only pointing him out because he is a recurring character in this entire series. You'll notice that like one of his mannerisms is that every time he finishes a thought or makes any point, he goes into like this manic grin, and it always struck me as like it's kind of like the kind of smile that you get from someone who's obviously trying to pull one over on you. Where it's just like
This is also
it's like he's aware
Sorry.
of what he's saying is completely insane, and he's just really hoping that he can trick you into it.
Yeah, and you'll see as these movies go on, he is the person with by far the craziest takes out of all of them. It's surprising to me that he is featured in as many interviews as he is. Like, he's not only a recurring character, but he gets more screen time than probably anybody collectively throughout the whole series.
And just to be clear, even though we are showing their faces and by extension names because their names show up in the movie, we are actively discouraging people. Do not harass these people. Do not go after them. Do not do any of that stuff. Trust me, it's not worth the time and effort. If they're going to come up with funny takes, just let them go. If you do consider them to be a threat for some reason, don't interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. Not that we consider them enemies, but anyone that does engage in the kind of harassment that we're actively discouraging, they probably do consider them an enemy. Point is,
Yeah, I mean,
leave them alone.
living in modernity right now is hard enough just dealing with the state. Let's get rid of the state, and then we'll fucking figure out whether or not the problems that emerge in our intersubjective social groups are worth caring about. But in the case of these people, as far as my personal suggestion, yeah, just not like my personal suggestion has nothing to do with like, you know, concern for them. That's a given. Care for them. Like, don't they're fucking at the very worst. Like, keep in mind that proponents of political ideology who are like this into it are basically Manchurian candidates. Like, they're victims as much as they are propagandists fundamentally. At least that's how I've come to see them. So don't if that's a helpful way of putting it, at least from my perspective. But that being the case, the Nation of Islam crowd is particularly crazy. So, like, as far as my personal suggestion, don't fuck with that kind of crazy. These people literally want a genocide. Keep that in mind.
Yeah, you're best just leaving them alone. Like, it's just best for everybody. Just both for your sake and for everybody else's. Anyways,
It's there. It's just that they're not allowing us to understand.
According to Dr. Ben, the original name of Africa was Alkebulan. Africa, the whole continent, was also called Ethiopia. As a matter of fact, the Atlantic Ocean was called the Ethiopian Sea. So there were several different names. Africa was really described by different tribes. It wasn't a whole
Sounds very
monolithic
Tolkien-esque.
society.
how so? I said, how is it Tolkien-esque?
Oh, the original name for Africa just sounds like something that I could picture out of that kind of high fantasy story.
Possibly. I'm just hearing that. I'm thinking to myself, it's possible, yeah. I mean, I know
mean,
that
not necessarily Tolkien, but yeah, it sounds very Middle Earthy.
but here's the
That's
thing.
what I meant.
Here's the thing. It's like I remember reading a green text about a guy who was part of the Peace Corps working in, I can't remember which country in Africa, but he described that, among other things, though I'm just going to simplify it to the point relevant to what I'm trying to say, is that like they form groups and communities that consist of populations in the thousands, people in Africa. And so extrapolating that backwards in time, beyond or before there was even the concept of a Peace Corps, back to, before the Stone Age, back to before, Africanus first identified and cataloged the continent for the Roman Empire, and thus solidified its name for basically up until modernity. You can imagine that every tribe had their own name for the land. So to say that there's like one single name for the land, when there were probably hundreds, thousands, possibly even tens of thousands of tribes with their own cultures, customs, and histories and languages, and that they all had this same name. No, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. Apparently,
Well, you see, the action that I understand the reason why the alleged original name for Africa, that may or may not be true, or there may or may not be merit to that, or I don't really understand the context behind that either way. But no, the lore here is the reason why it's Tolkien-esque is because Tolkien was a proponent of the Hollow Earth, and when Europeans were originally colonizing Africa and just discovering Africans for the first time, they were living inside of giant mounds made of dirt like termites, and that's there was a huge war over it. It took years to knock down the dirt mounds. It was like it was like World War Z in the 1500s.
oh no. Anyways,
And
should I continue?
that's why history had to be revised. No one can know that that's for the sake of modern Africans. No one can know that that's how they originally lived. The end.
Anyways,
But eventually,
All right.
they named Africa after
Yeah,
a
let's
European.
continue.
Africa was not called Africa. It's actually named after the one who actually conquered the Carthaginian, Scipio Africanus. So they usually the Roman types of system is that the conquering general gets to name the region he conquered.
Yeah, and
He
see,
gets his
that's
name to be placed on
another thing that you'll see a lot in these movies. The narratives of different people being interviewed alongside each other, directly contradicting each other. And it just not being acknowledged within the context of the movie.
that region. So Scipio Africanus
This
is
name
they-
that was
they
derived from maps. Actually, Africa was named after literally not even 20 seconds apart from each other.
it's beautiful. Anyways,
named a certain terrain after him. So everybody should say, well, they just call it Africa or Africanus. But if you look to
Yeah, let's continue.
Dr. Ben's work, you'll find that it was called Kush, and you'll find it was called Al-Kibulan. It had many names, Ethiopia, which is essentially Greek, but a whole continent was once known as Ethiopia.
so previously it was known as
It
Ethiopia.
was called weed.
Kush.
It was called Kush.
You can back this up. He said Kush. I heard it too.
We did.
I mean, I'm fine with that. But I just can't help but think, like, Ethiopia, he said it's Greek. I didn't say it was Greek. Esso didn't say it was Greek. He said it was Greek. And the Greeks were, what was their skin color again?
Well, they're Mediterranean. That's where Greece is.
Yeah, so therefore their skin color would have had to have been...
Black, of course. Because everybody was black. Everybody was black until the 1500s, when the Great Whitening happened. It came with the mini ice age. The snow never left.
It
Was a different kind of. It was a different kind of snow that doesn't exist anymore. That merged with our genes like a symbiote.
Yes, it turned all the white people white. But only
It was
in...
created by Yakub. That was how the first white people made it.
Yakub created white snow. It was meant to be a super weapon in order to scare off all the black people. The idea was the snow would turn into water, and then all the black people wouldn't be able to swim. Unless he'd be able to fight off all of his enemies just by cutting up its super soakers.
No, so to give you an idea of how completely insane the Nation of Islam movement is, this is a mainstream part of their narrative of history and society. Yakub, the character Yakub. You want to explain Yakub real quickly, Heretic, or should I?
I'll do it. So, Yakub
Alright.
was a scientist who seek to take over the world, and in order to do so, he wanted to create a breed of superhumans who lacked who lacked any sort of empathy or compassion or even intellect. And as such, he was basically trying to create humanoid monster super soldiers. And in order to do so, he started experimenting on humans and discovered that their biology consists of a black germ and a brown germ. And by isolating the brown germ and then crossbreeding that with brown germs from other black people, he was able to distill it down into the white germ. And then when he started creating like white germ dominant humans, that's where white people came from. However, Yakub
So
underestimated his creation, was consumed by it as much as like this grand Wakanda civilization that they previously had was.
white people are genetically engineered demons that were created through a process that basically is like the bacterial equivalent of tree grafting. So it's and this is what all of them believe. And it is mainstream in this organization, and quite a few of these people that I know. I don't know about Tariq Nasheed, if he necessarily is associated with Nation of Islam, but quite a few of these people that get interviewed here are. I know that for a fact.
And I'm reminded
Like I think.
of, and I'm
Sorry,
actually
what were you gonna say?
I am just thinking about, like, I don't know how well known the Yaqub myth is within the Nation of Islam, because I know with Scientology, for instance, the evil Emperor Xenu and that whole mythology is kept from most Scientologists and members of the Scientology Church until they're like a really, really high rank. And I don't know if Nation of Islam does something similar or not, even though like this information is publicly available.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I know that at the very least it's in Nation of Islam. Like now that I'm thinking about it, there's a subgroup that broke off from Nation of Islam that's even crazier called the Five Percenters, and it might be every one of them that is a proponent of the Yaqub narrative, but the Yaqub narrative is also promoted by it is a regardless it is something that a concerning amount of people take seriously. And yeah, it's like even crazy. It's honestly, I don't know if I would go as far as to say crazier than Scientology, but it's like on that tier of completely fucking batshit. There's no way anyone can rationally come to this conclusion. It's the result. It's just the result of psychological programming.
Anyways, let's continue.
It's terrible, about
Right.
just where math came from. All of the pictures that they've shown out of Africa, they've never really educated the Americans, white or black, about what really goes on in Africa, what some of the cities are really like. And that we're not running around over there with Tarzan, and when they show anything from Africa, even down to today, they pick the worst scenes, the most terrible situations, and they show those. But we have a proud history. But of course, what we did in Egypt 5,000 years ago, or what we did in China 35,000 years ago, is of no benefit if we don't understand what to do today and how that would.
Remember, the Chinese are black.
Reasonable take that was completely fucking ruined. Hey, Africa's not just people living in mud huts and swinging around in trees. Like, there seems to be a lot of people outside of Africa that genuinely think, all right, Yeah, and black people were Egyptians and black people were Chinese. It's like, no, your point was correct, but now the examples you're citing and the claims you're making are not.
It's a pretty common tactic in persuasion where when you want to introduce a controversial topic, you build up credibility by introducing several uncontroversial topics. So I will say,
Yeah.
you are here, you are listening to me, and the moon is made of cheese. Two uncontroversial takes, one controversial take. That's how that works. Anyways, I think that's what she was trying to do there. He's just like trying to introduce
Yeah.
like, oh, Africa isn't all mud huts. There are cities. There are there is actual development, and the ancient Chinese were black.
Well, and that's the other thing, because there's like 4 or 5 moments, I think, collectively that I remember throughout this whole series of points like that, which at the very least, taken at face value in an abstract concept, in an abstract context, are valid. Because yeah, if you look at the sort of narrative that's promoted by culture warriors or white identitarians, they legitimately just seem to think that the reason Africa is the way it is because people just sit around and do nothing. And if you just take a cursory look at the way states, at basically any geopolitical developments that happened throughout the 20th century, it's immediately apparent why Africa, most parts of Africa at the very least, are shitholes today.
Now I'm looking at the chat right now. Joan Beer says, didn't they, referring to the Egyptian pharaohs, enslave people to build the pyramids? Sort of. I mean, like the jury's still out on that, but it's believed.
Considering that there was a political economy in Egypt, yes, but I guess it depends on what sense in which you mean that.
Yeah, it's like slavery, as practiced throughout the world, has had different forms and permutations. Were people forced through involuntary labor to construct these things? Probably. Were they? However, there's also a lot of evidence that the people who built the pyramids were treated well, earned wages, and were even honored in the construction of the pyramids themselves, like given their own burial chambers should they die within, which in Egyptian culture would have been regarded as an extremely high honor.
Yeah, so basically, if the impression that one would get in actually reading how the workers that built the slaves were treated, if we're considering them to be slaves, then people working on mining rigs in Alaska are slaves.
There's also the fact that all of the pyramids were not only built to rather highly sophisticated specifications, but that each of the individual bricks would have had to have been constructed by professional masons to be able to consistently get proportions exactly right all the time, which indicates not only a rather sophisticated degree of engineering proficiency, but also a high level of or high ceiling of skill in labor that would very strongly suggest against the kind of labor you would get through, say, people you captured in war, for instance. Basically, you get people to work there who wanted to work there, and I think there's also evidence that the pharaoh just straight up built towns at pyramid construction sites, like functional towns with their own economies and stuff.
The problem, though, is that in the state defending property titles, the example of a mining operation would be perfect because in the state defending property titles, it means that one party necessarily has to base an economic model uh, on monopolizing that mine. they literally don't have a choice, because in order to legally operate there, whoever's operating there has a monopoly because of the fact that the state is defending a property title, instead of people just actually going there and homesteading resources that they can act on directly. Digressing a bit, but my point though is you can make the argument that, I didn't mean to bring that up to say, oh well, arguments for, that being slavery are ridiculous. No, you could fairly reasonably argue that that is the case, given that it's an economic model that could only emerge based on something the state does that requires oppressing people.
I think there's quite a lot of evidence that historically there have been points in history where slaves, people who were legally property of others, were not only treated well but actually very wealthy. Like Roman gladiators, for instance. If you were a particularly prominent gladiator, you were basically a celebrity. You would get endorsement deals from local businesses. You were independently wealthy and could own your own property, including your own slaves. You were still the property of your master, your dominus, but point is that there's the situation of slavery is like way more complex than what the mainstream narrative about history actually entails.
I'm just laughing because also gladiators were like Rome's equivalent of professional wrestlers. And you mentioned that they owned slaves, which in my mind translated to Hulk Hogan having a slave, and that's a funny thing to imagine.
Yeah, but no, it's true though. Slave in the Roman Empire did not mean the same thing that it did in the antebellum South, where it was basically just like you were a member, like you were a Roman citizen. You were just on the lowest caste.
Hulk, I'm just. It got me so goddamn funny. Hulk Hogan, just in a TV interview in the '80s, is dragging around some black person by like a collar with a chain attached to it. Come on, brother.
Anyways, let's continue.
Would help us to survive. And we discovered the clock. We did discover the wheel. Black man has never been a caveman. You've never been in a cave. There's no history of it. You've ever been in a cave. We discovered mathematics and the alphabet and writing and all of those great things that they have built a foundation on, that they came and got and took back to other countries. We don't know if Africa.
What's up?
Black people invented language. Because that's how language works. It's something that was invented. Like it's not a mechanism of the brain. So people came up with that. I don't know. That's great.
Wasn't there an ancient civilization called the Phoenicians who, let's see here, Eastern Mediterraneans, who, and I bring them up because, to my recollection, they were the first known human civilization to have an alphabet, or to utilize writing.
Yeah, I am not exactly familiar with that myself off the top of my head, so I can't really comment.
Me neither, but
full sense.
Me neither. I'm just bringing it up because it's just like it's perfectly reasonable to assume that civilizations will have a need to communicate information in a way that exists beyond words, meaning writing is going to be necessary at some point in some form, even if it is just tally marks to count things. So, and I don't think anyone's contesting that wheels were existed in Africa.
I mean, culture warriors seriously might, based on the way that some of them frame societies and their narrative of reality.
But they're
It's like the inverse of Tariq Nasheed's narrative, color swatches determining the perspective one has on a demographic that is defined by that specific trait and what behavioral characteristics are associated with it, and it's just black is bad, white is good instead.
I brought that up earlier. It's just like they agree on basically everything. It's just that which skin color bad, which skin color good is just reversed. Anyways, I'm continuing.
2020
Sorry.
2025 InfoWars, aka after it's rebranded to the race war.
Give it a little bit of time.
Would be like without the white
Oh my
influence.
god,
We don't know what it would be like without the Rockefellers and the Beers and all of them. We don't know what Africa would have been like. We do know that there were greater places in Africa other than Egypt, which is the only one they let us know about.
Concurrently and simultaneously during the Pyramid Age, there are great things happening in West Africa, but we very seldom. There are nations known as Dartichet. Dartichet is now, would geographically presently be
they let us know about.
We have
What do they let them know about?
Yeah, we let them know about the kingdom of Egypt. We don't we're all secretly conspiring to not tell them about any of the other parts of African history that's not mainstream. And also notice that, of course, this is relative very conveniently to how a person in the U.S. would perceive history in the U.S.'s propaganda model, because obviously other parts of the world don't have this perspective about Africa. Like places in Africa.
So
Considering.
so
Sorry, what were you gonna say?
So the government putting forward a narrative in government schools regarding African history and them omitting certain information is the same as them actively preventing access to information.
Well, yeah, because people are still getting mad about them going around and saying that all black people are basically the same.
Apparently.
People in Africa don't take that shit seriously and probably get upset about it, not because they're racist or because of white brainwashing or whatever. It's because there's active geopolitical conflicts going on right now that are based on ethnic pretexts that you could only acknowledge internally, if you acknowledge that there's different ethnic groups within Africa other than just black.
Mm-hmm. Anyways, I'm going to continue here.
We had the Nok culture,
Yeah.
which is where we today would call Nigeria. We have the Monomotapan Empire in what today we call Zimbabwe. There are over 300 stone structures in southern Africa. And then you have that great structure in the great Zimbabwe that shows a direct relationship to the Grand Lodge of Luxor in Egypt. You have Puanit, which is in today's Somalia, Ethiopia. You have the Kush empires that are simultaneously happening. When
Kush Empire. There's nothing... It's just a funny name, that's all.
Kush. Kush Empire. Oh my god, it would be amazing. It would be amazing if the picture that they used to there was a picture they used to represent it, and it was like one of those fake Egyptian drawings from that episode of Aqua Teen Hunger Force where they get the T-shirt of the dead. That's the Kush Empire.
But what happens is that we go back in time, say 5,500 years, and we have a translator with us, and it turns out that when they're figuring out what to call their civilization, it's just a bunch of people giggling about how a bunch of idiots in the future are going to find the name of their empire funny. That's why they named
Hold
it
on.
that way. What's up? What's going on?
Hold on a minute. Just really.
Alright, while he's away, I'm just going to keep playing.
Hatshepsut, the great Pharaoh king, although she was a woman, she was a Pharaoh king, sitting on the throne of Kemet. Her cousin sits on the throne of Puanit, or what we call Somalia. There are great things happening historically.
Okay, I am very sorry about that. I was rudely interrupted, but anyway, let's just get back to the movie.
Yep, right now we're talking about this great Egyptian king who was a woman sitting on the throne of Egypt, who has a cousin that sits on the throne of Somalia, I believe it was, and talking about how there's great things happening in Africa, which that just means that political power plays are happening in the region, which, I mean, you could characterize that as great, I guess, but I mean, like, it's just, family interbreeding and gaining political leverage in a region. It's nothing really amazing, I don't think.
African continent. You have the kingdoms of Kuba and Luba.
Yeah, I
in
mean, by
Central
the
Africa.
end of it, they were
Mansa
so
Musa.
inbred that it was getting to the point where they couldn't even walk. And so it was probably worse than the Habsburgs. It's just that it was 2,500 plus years ago, so it's not as well documented.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think there was actually a reproduction of what King Tut might have looked like when he was alive. That guy is like deformed.
It's not because they're freakishly inbred monster people. It's because that's what the gods look like, and that's why they're coming out this way. It's actually the Egyptian government's propaganda model at the time.
Yep,
How it was framed.
most likely, even though the Egyptian gods were furries.
Was the king of
Well,
Mali.
you see, they're furries,
In
and that's
the
the
13th
reason why, because they created a government, they were punishing them by making them look that way.
Understandable.
1800s, very wealthy brother. During the dark age of Europe was going through a dark age. Africa was thriving. It was the gold capital. Mansa Musa was considered the wealthiest man on the planet at the time. Mansa Musa had a very well-known pilgrimage to Mecca, where he went to Egypt and went to Mecca and went through Egypt, and he gave.
Wait, during the Dark Age? So that was like from 500 to 1000 AD.
Which is not the period that I think Mansa Musa would have been alive. I think Mansa Musa was alive around 1200, 1300 AD. Let me.
Yeah, that would.
I'm not as familiar with that narrative, that aspect of history, so I very well could. Yep, died 1337. So the period of history he's referring to would have been when the plague was happening.
Yeah, that's not the Dark Age. That's the medieval age. So I think he's just trying to push forward a narrative like Dark Ages. People were ignorant, they were stupid, civilization was rough, it was brutal, which, yes, it was, but that was because states were around.
It was drawn on a piece of parchment, and the art style is pre-Renaissance, which means that it could have been made from any point in time from around the time Charlemagne was crowned to when people were living in fucking caves.
Mm-hmm.
Gave out so much gold, it threw off the Egyptian economy.
Anyway,
In
let's
today's
continue.
terms, Mansa Musa gave away what would be the equivalent of $100 million in gold.
The African was the first race to circumnavigate the entire globe.
All over Africa.
The Africa, there you have it again. Africa has one race. There are no ethnicities. They're just African.
Literally,
And then they're going to say, oh, you circumnavigated the globe. Are you going to provide any descriptions, name any names, or are you just going to throw out the claim and then hope we take it hook, line, and sinker?
Hey, you're saying we're not all Africans? That's racist.
World.
You're being
the peoples of
racist
color that
by
they call
denying
Africans,
their
South
identity,
Babylonians.
Harris.
We were all over the world. So to say that in Ghana they had the
That's
Ashanti.
amazing.
They had, I mean, all over. We had powerful dynasties, so innumerable we couldn't even name them. Because remember, we had hundreds of thousands of years, and that's the secret. They cut us off at 6,000 because anything beyond that they could say is mystery. They could say is myth. So when you control the information, which is essentially what they've learned to do, under the Vatican they have about 6 to 8 miles of storage space that have all of our artifacts, and the Virgin Mother being black, all of the faces. We have to take apart the layers that are actually constructed in the lie. They're layered.
That's the reason mainstream narratives of history cut off at 6,000 years. It's because if you went back any further, you'd find evidence of Wakanda.
Clearly, that's the only reason.
Oh my god, it's amazing.
Just
It's like those fucking... It's like those stupid TikTok theory videos. Like, oh, is there 300 years of history missing? Because not a lot happened in this period of time that gets talked about in cartoons I grew up with.
apparently. I'm just listening to this and thinking to myself, I have heard theories about civilizations like even older than ones that we currently are aware of, and some archaeological evidence to suggest some even megastructures that are a lot older than even the pyramids in Egypt. I believe there's like one ziggurat in Peru, I think it is, that's like buried under a mountain, and it's only known to exist because the mountain itself is oddly irregular in its shape. I can't remember exactly how it works, but it's supposed to be a pyramid buried under a mountain that itself forms a square-shaped pyramid shape.
And there's an even older archaeological site in the middle of the Nubian desert that's just a pit that has like one of those photo booths you can put a quarter in and take a picture of yourself in. And it's speculated that the original white people that discovered Africa went in there and took a picture of themselves, and then a black person came out of the pit, and that's how this all got started. It's like that one SCP. That's the history of Africa.
They just came out. That's just how it works. Anyways, I'm going to continue.
I don't know, since we're making shit up, might as well be entertaining.
Anyways, I'm continuing.
For instance, you have a discipline in academia called Egyptology. Now, what is Egyptology? They say, well, it's the study of Egypt. Well, no, it's not the study of Egypt. Egyptology was created by the Vatican in order to make sure that there was a screening mechanism in place to explain away the truth that was being excavated every year that kept giving them proof of who the ancient Kemites were. So Egyptology and Egyptologists are essentially agents of this information. Where else do you see a society, a people, and a way of life actually become a science? Unless you have specific purposes to make sure that the information that you are gathering on those people are given the proper perspectives to maintain the lie. So you don't get an Americology, you don't get Europology, you don't get Russiaology.
Richard Pryor, right? When he had his special back in 1977.
Jesus. So, turning the study of societies into something that can actually be scrutinized scientifically is denying ethnic identitarianism, and that's why it's bad.
Guess so. I mean, it can't be
But then
because
also, anybody who's making claims about the history of Egypt within academia is an agent of the Vatican. And the Vatican is conspiring, is coordinating all of the white people in the world to conspire against the black people to make sure that none of them figure out that this is going on.
so the whole conspiracy originated from the Vatican.
That's what he said.
But wait a minute, the Vatican is a relatively new political entity. I mean, it's also very old in the sense that it's basically the successor state of the Roman Empire, but you're still looking at a political entity that apparently has been coordinating the suppression of black history for thousands and thousands of years.
Heretic, you're putting way too much thought into this. He just said that the Vatican is like fucking... The Vatican is the pay pig of all white people, basically.
Well, where do I get my money? I want my Catholic money for maintaining my part of the conspiracy.
All white people are coordinating through the Catholic Church.
I want my money. Give
That's
it.
the mechanism. That's how it works. Every single person is in on it.
Maybe I am taking this too seriously just simply because
Great.
I want to understand how this works within its own internal reasoning and its own rules. And as such, I have to think about, okay, so if this is true, what else has to be true? And it just becomes more and more unhinged the more it unravels. The more the chain of implications reveals itself to me.
That's why I'm dying over here. It's because all I'm doing is just deconstructing it logically. It's actually insane.
You know what it reminds me, actually, in regards to, like, really ancient artifacts found? There's a trade route that goes from, I believe, modern-day Iraq all the way to, I think, Greece. I could be wrong there. In obsidian knives. It's possible they traded other things, but it's believed that the trade route existed because these obsidian knives of roughly the same make and composition were found along this same linear path, which implies that these things were traded regularly and they might have occasionally fallen off of carts or something. And that these knives go back as far as 30,000 BC. Meaning that complex complex trade routes existed for a very long time.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. We're not saying that the narrative of history that is promoted by academia doesn't have problems by any means. It's just the Vatican is not the fucking influencing machine controlling the ethnic identity of white people. It is the point that I'm making. I think you can make the claim that that the narrative the state is promoting about history is wrong without also claiming that white people are organic androids controlled by the Catholic Church, all
Yeah.
conspiring to fucking target black people and discriminate against them constantly.
I mean, we could probably devote multiple streams to multiple points, or to talking about just a few points about ways in which the mainstream narrative of history is wrong. I mean, we could probably just devote an entire stream just to the 1930s specifically. And even then, that we'd probably only be able to scratch the surface in one stream. Point is, yeah, as I'm just reinforcing what Esso said, the mainstream narrative of history is nonsensical. Not just in the sense that they oversimplify topics and eliminate nuance in order to present a narrative that's very simplified and digestible to average normies, but also in the sense that a lot of the stuff that they present to people is just flat out wrong, incorrect, and provably so using factual data and evidence that exists independent of observation. So yeah. Anyways, let's continue here.
And there's a scene. They only allowed him to do 5 shows. In fact, they were rather ignorant because it took them 5 shows to realize what the brother was really doing. Richard Pryor, there's a scene where he goes in to the pyramids, and he is carrying the bags of the archaeologists and the anthropologists who are of European descent. And they're talking amongst themselves about what this find is and its importance, the greatness of it. And Richard Pryor is in this temple looking all around, and he begins to say, but all these people are black. He said, look at that guy over there. That guy look like my uncle. And he's just, it's humorous, but what Richard Pryor is actually talking about is that, these are black people in these pyramids, and these are the people that built these pyramids. He said, wait a minute, these people... And then all of a sudden, the camera begins to show the anthropologists of European descent, and they start to nudge each other because they realize, hey, the guy carrying the bags is looking around and he's learning some things in here. So very quietly, you see them backing out of the pyramid, right? And Richard Pryor is still there talking about how great the pyramid is, and then all of a sudden, they show you the door close, and all of a sudden the scene goes black, which means that was the blackout on the information for black folk to understand their history. This is what Richard Pryor was
fucking learns too much.
This is what actually has happened. Richard was
There's a
telling
blackout
us,
on
this
the
is what has happened to
information.
us. Because as you become conscious, and brother becomes conscious, and as a community we become conscious, the Europeans who know this,
They have
are
to
beginning
maintain
realize.
the
So
integrity
they're
of
trying to shut the
Operation
door on us.
Blackout. That's the name of the conspiracy that all white people are secretly in on.
Well, they just blacked out of the scene right here. So this is clearly signaling to me, as an unpaid intern in this conspiracy, that Hidden Colors is actually part of Operation Blackout. Because this guy who is clearly lying, this grinning charlatan who is obviously lying to us, is in on it.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I'm admittedly not familiar with the media that he's referring to, but it sounds so funny, even if it is actually, like, if it is framed the way that he's describing it, that is hilarious, and that's because it's like it's portraying the world as though, like, organizations and societies actually worked the way that black identitarians thought it did. Like, there's a black guy looking at the pictures inside a pyramid. My God, it's me. They're trying to make the world. They're trying to make the world black and white, but look at all these hidden colors. and it's just like all of the other anthropologists, the white people. They're like fucking KGB agents in a James Bond movie. They're like secret police. They're like, hey,
He
figured
knows!
things out.
He knows! Get him! That's typically what that's what their reaction is, and I know my throat's going to be hurting like hell tomorrow. But I mean, even if I don't know that media either. But my guess is that while that's certainly one interpretation, it's also possible that the hieroglyphs were depicting Nubians who were uncontroversially black and basically just were their neighbors further down the Nile. And Egypt's in Africa, and Africa has a lot of black people, and so it's not difficult to believe that Egypt and Egyptians would have regular contact and trade with Africans. What that entailed, who they were trading with in addition to the Nubians and interacting with, I don't know.
Slaves.
Yeah, they were all of them were just slaves.
Slaves, basically.
That depiction shown in that very well could have been Nubian or African slaves working on the pyramids. I don't know, but it's worth taking note of nonetheless that this is the narrative they're going with. Anyways, I'm going to continue. Hidden colors. Asia.
African people established the first dynasties in Asia. When you look at old paintings of Eastern Asian people, you can see the African ancestry in their features.
The Japanese were formed when Ethiopians brought South Koreans onto the island and combined with the original people there known as the...
That's literally not possible.
The Japanese were formed. Not only that, but it was the result of a forced deportation when Africa colonized Korea.
No, they didn't colonize Korea. They colonized South Korea. Listen closely.
Ethiopians brought South Koreans onto the island.
They brought South Koreans onto the islands. Not Koreans, South Koreans.
Yes, South Korea existed in the period of time that this was taking place. It wasn't just Korea as a kingdom.
Obviously. Why would you assume otherwise? And we all know how the Ethiopians got there. That's just going to get glossed over completely.
Just right.
Nobody ever thought to, swim to that island. Or, take a boat and get to that island who already lived in China. Or Korea. Or even Mongolia. I mean, I actually don't know. I actually don't know. Could the Japanese coastline, would that be visible from China? Or Korea?
Off the top of my head, I'm not exactly sure.
Could someone take a look at that, because I'm actually mildly curious now. But it's an interesting claim nonetheless. And I can't help it. You kind of alluded to it, but you actually did bring up an interesting point. It's just how did the Ethiopians bring the South Koreans to the Japanese island? They deported them there. They kidnapped them. Then could they have raped them and then left them on the island to fend for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, that's just being glossed over. Wait a minute. So, Ethiopia colonized this place. Okay, we're just not even going to ask questions about that, any part of that, right now. But okay, what would be the motivation for doing so? You're just completely glossing that over, because a forced deportation, that suggests there's some very aggressive, not virtuous behavior going on, even within your narrative of societies.
And I
And considering you people explicitly advocate for a genocide, I think you're doing that on purpose.
there is another thing too, which is just that we have a pretty like I'm not familiar with history in a lot of the Asia, but I do know that they were pretty good about record keeping in basically all of these countries, and that a lot of even their modern day conflicts have roots that go back literally thousands of years. And I can't help but think
And I
that
mean,
an interaction with Ethiopian colonizers would have been a very significant event that would have been recorded, and even some kind of like grudge that would have been held on to by modern day Koreans who you think would be absolutely disgusted and repulsed by modern day black people for reasons that literally only they remember.
And I mean, there's also, just in general, there's no way that this is true. I mean, in the 1500s, there was a notable historical figure in Japan that is a note. He was, a black samurai, but that is literally the only reason he was a historically noteworthy figure, is because being black was so rare in Japan that just that made him a historically noteworthy character in Japan. So the fact that that is the case suggests to me that there's no fucking way that the history of Japan has its origins in an African fucking deportation campaign.
African deportation campaign, and we're expected to see the Africans going around the world as like some kind of good thing. Anyways, I'm just going to continue here.
Yeah. It sounds like an
And combined with the
invasion.
original people there known as the
Even if
Ainu.
we're taking that at
The
face
Ainu
value.
now, you're going to find the Ainu in the Philippines. They're going to be called Negritos. You're going to find them in Vietnam. They're called the Champa or the Montagnards. You're going to find African people throughout the Far East. Very dark complexion, very curly hair, wide nose, thick lip. You will also find those with straight hair. You will find those with a more aquiline nose.
Some of the first Buddha statues clearly had African features, classical African features. If you go to Thailand, if you go to Korea, if you go to Vietnam, you will
Buddha
see some of these
statues.
statues up that has the classical African nose, classical African lips, woolly hair.
When we go to Asia, we see that the founder of the samurai warrior, okay, in Japan, all right, was an African. We found that the founders of the ninja system was an African. In fact, in Japan, there's a saying that if you don't have a little bit of African blood, you can never
There's
truly
no
be
fucking
a
way
samurai.
that either of those things are true.
There's no like first off, ninjas were just stage hands. They were people that went behind the scenes during plays were all black, specifically to move props around. That was what they did.
Yeah, and the samurai was like the military order that ran the government for several hundred years. And did you fucking hear what the last thing the last guy said was the last 5 seconds?
Yep, you can't be a
He
samurai
said,
without
"There's
African
a-
blood.
He's expecting people to believe that that's a social custom in Japan. Yes, it is a requirement to be a mulatto in order to be a samurai. There is no fucking way that is true.
And then they just
And anyone who knows anything about like the Japanese government's propaganda model around Japanese identity would be able to tell that that's obviously not true from the start. That's like saying the Nazi regime promoted in its propaganda model the idea that in order to be a good Aryan you have to be half black. It's fucking ridiculous.
Well, any good Aryan is at least half Jew. Because obviously that just makes
Because
sense.
yeah, for anyone who doesn't know, to this day the Japanese government pretty much openly endorses a Nazi-like view on ethnic identity, which is basically Japanese identity, like national identity as they conceive of it. Those two concepts are fused together within their government's propaganda model, and their government endorses a Nazi-like view of it. So
It is interesting, to say the least, and I can't help but notice this as well. I'm just going to back up a little bit here because of how interesting it is. Not what he says specifically, but how the movie actually frames it. Because the moment he says it, it just immediately like jump cuts. Not literally jump cuts, but just fades very, very quickly to the next guy. Like prevents it. It's actively presented in such a way as to prevent us from thinking, "Oh my goodness, what was it they just said?" Because if anyone like thought about what he said for 5 minutes, they'd think, "Wow, this guy's nuts." Anyways, I'm just going to show you guys really quick just so you can see what I'm talking about.
Ninja system was an African. In fact, in Japan, there's a saying that if you don't have a little bit of African blood, you can never truly be a samurai.
Martial arts was established by a black Dravidian who was living.
Yeah, see it? You see how quick that was? They don't let you think about it. They just throw it in there and then move on to the next thing to completely distract you from it, forcing you to have to accept that premise uncritically.
at least the trains run on time. Yeah, well, you see, that's because Mussolini was actually secretly a black man. They whitened him up in historical photos.
I mean, of course. Have you ever you've seen videos and pictures of him? He has clearly an African nose, African lips. They just do that thing like what Stalin did when he wanted people removed from photos. They did that with El Duce. What you don't know is that El Duce is actually the name of an ancient African goddess, and it represents fertility, strength, power, and something else. I don't remember what that other thing was. And I'm not making things up, by the way. This is absolutely 100% true.
When Mussolini was talking about living one day as a lion, he wasn't referring to siege mentality. He was referring to his African identity coming out. And that's what allowed him to get the trains running on time.
Hell yeah.
It was him tapping in. It was him tapping into his hidden colors.
Anyways,
in southern India by the name of Bodhidharma. Now, Bodhidharma, it was said that he walked from southern India into Asia, China, and on his way there, he would study the fighting mechanisms of animals, and he used that as a form of self-defense for himself, and that's where martial arts started. There was another guy named Tigwai who was an original master of martial arts, and if you look at old paintings of Tigwai, this dude looks like Lionel Richie. So martial arts was really established in Africa, even during slavery in Brazil.
Even within their own official narrative, they're saying that these are people who were Indians, as in people from India, people who were in the Asian continent, and then they're trying to claim that, oh, this originated in Africa. Even if you accepted the premise that the people who were doing this were black, which I do not accept, but even if you did do that, these people were clearly in Asia when they did it.
Oh my god, that's substance for your argument for you right there. What's your proof that this historical character was a black person? Well, in this picture of him, he kind of looks like Lionel Richie.
Well, you see, he has dark complexion in this. The entire the entire picture is dark. In fact, like you look at this, this one right here. He has his skin color is the exact same color as the parchment that it's on. which is like off, which is like this yellowish. Honestly, it just looks like a guy. It just looks like a guy.
It looks like the way old Catholic art would depict Jews.
And if you look at old paintings of Tigwai, this dude looks like Lionel Richie. So martial arts was really established in Africa. Even during slavery in Brazil, there's a form of Brazilian martial arts, which is African martial arts called capoeira. And what they would do, the African slaves would practice this form of martial art, and they would disguise it as dancing.
When we look at the early pictures of most of the deities of Asia, nearly all of them bore striking resemblance to the deities of the Nile Valley civilizations. And even in their writings, you will see that even in Asia, not just Greece and Rome, but even in Asia, you see them paying tribute to the spiritual systems and history that they had learned in Africa. In fact, the Asian spiritual system is probably the closest approximate to the traditional African spiritual system. From the one, you get many, with the creator being manifested in all living organisms, be it a tree or a human being. That is.
Do you have any? Not you, but is this guy going to present any kind of specific example? And even then, it's like I made this case earlier that Africa is not one big cultural and ethnic or religious monolith. You had thousands, probably even, I don't want to say millions, but the point is you had a lot of groups with their own individual beliefs. Yes, you had a lot of empires. They rose and they fell, but you still had like large numbers of groups with their own independent beliefs. And is it possible that some of them might have had resemblances, or possibly even, I doubt this is likely, but could they have been influenced by or even influenced the Shinto system in Japan? I mean, I don't think, as I said before, I don't think it's likely, but it's not impossible. Could they have developed similar systems independently of one another? Yeah.
I love that this also very subtly insinuates that, like, if you have a specific, like, ethnicity, that means you can't, like, be a Buddhist if you're a white person, for example. It's like it's the only way to be a Buddhist is to be an Asian, or the only way to the only way to study voodoo or understand any of it's to be an African.
Obviously.
Just there's racial religions / spiritual systems.
Oh, I mean, you've heard of genetic memory, right?
Yes.
That's exactly what that is. There was a certain context in regards to certain ideas that makes it impossible for people who don't have that DNA within them to be able to understand what the hell is even going on within the concepts being described. And I can give you an example too. Hegel, the alleged German philosopher, whose philosophy makes absolutely no freaking sense to anyone, but a lot of people who want to sound smart pretend that they understand what he's talking about. So you don't, and the only reason that people have that interpretation of Hegel, that he was an idiot who had no idea what he's talking about, was because he didn't have the right DNA. And you need the right context that can only come from having the right Germanic DNA to be able to really understand Hegel. And that's what made it so special. I mean, Karl Marx had the right DNA, which is how Hegel was able to become so influential to Karl Marx, because he was able to understand it. But you see, because you don't have enough of the right German DNA, you don't understand Hegel.
Oh my god, that's that is, I didn't even understand that context behind Black identitarianism. I'm familiar with the concept of genetic memory, and not to get too into it, but there actually is a scientific basis for it, but it would take a bit of time to explain here. What I'm laughing about is the way that it's being described in how in the way that this claim is being presented. It is like it informs what possible belief systems you can have, is how it's being treated here, which means by implication that he's saying essentially that being black is like being genetically autistic.
Oh no.
I
Also,
I didn't I didn't say that. I didn't say that. That's how the person in this documentary is treating it.
I like this comment
Hey, yo,
here.
black.
Sorry, continue.
All right. You go ahead.
I like this comment here. I have German heritage, and when I watch Hyperborean edits, it does awaken my blood memory.
Yes, I have. I have white heritage, and as a result, whenever I see animals that have white fur, it activates my spiritual power. I see a lack of color being projected on the environment, and I'm like, yes, as a creation of Yakub, I approve. Let's hide all of the colors from the world.
Yes! Yes!
Like it's fucking like uh like white people are the antagonist of a mid 2000s fucking like PSP game.
Here's no, listen. So in the original airing of the Powerpuff Girls, there was an episode where a clown got bleach spilled on him because a bleach truck got into a car accident, and it turned him into a mime that was sucking all the color and sound from the world just by touching it. That seems to be the impression I get from how these Pan Africans think white people are. They're just.
That's white people. We've already succeeded, so there aren't any mimes anymore, but that's how the modern world was created. That episode is secretly explaining everything.
Well, the whole reason that that
We
episode aired.
let's
The whole point of that episode airing was to indoctrinate young white kids and help instruct them on what they're supposed to do.
And now, if anybody says anything about it, we can gaslight the black people and convince everybody that they're crazy. Because think of how crazy that would sound to anybody who encounters it.
Oh, and before anybody asks,
The history of the world was secretly encoded in an episode of Powerpuff Girls. Yeah, but that's exactly what the white people want you to think.
although for all the white people in our audience, you can expect your check from the Vatican for $14.88 to come. Let's see, today is Wednesday, so Monday of next week. Anyways, let's continue.
It's fundamental to Asian.
Okay. I'm the very first white person ever to break my silence. I'm the white whistleblower, and I can confirm that yes, we've been doing this for years to the black population. Every single one of us is in. Every single one of us is in on it, and the secret goal is we're trying to turn the entire population of Africa into sausage links for real estate. It's all about that prime real estate. The Soviet and US political economies need it because their political economies, the planning of interest is so heavily based on real estate. Their housing markets require it. And turning them all into sausage links also takes care of the food shortage problem.
And this is, and also I should mention, I meant to bring this up, but J.C. Armitage also brought it up. This is why your, this is why your character is an Arctic fox, because you're trying to
Yes.
trying to hide all the colors.
It's because I'm so white that even in my imagination, I can't imagine myself being anything other than a fucking vampire.
Anyways, let's continue.
Thought, but it's also fundamental to African thought, which predated Asia.
When you go into these jungles in Bangkok and the areas of Vietnam, when the Vietnamese, when they were fighting in Vietnam, they went into these temples, they saw nothing but these African faces. When they saw the black man dressed up like that, they thought that the Buddha gods had come back. All these black men dressed in these American faces, they were accustomed in the bush to these black faces,
Buddha
black
gods.
Buddhas.
Buddha gods. Because that's totally how Buddhism works.
No, I love it.
Also, there is a ton of historical evidence for the Viet Cong being confused by the presence of African Americans in the United States Armed Forces.
Literally didn't even know that was possible. Yet we're expected to believe that that's just normal and everybody's been brainwashed into thinking otherwise. And also, yeah, I keep laughing about the way that they're presenting the concept of a Buddha because there's no faster way to tell whether or not someone that's trying to talk about Buddhism is just making shit up. And the dead giveaway is that they usually characterize the concept of the Buddha as like interchangeable with the way Abrahamic religions would characterize a god, or would think of it as though it's treated like it's a divine or deific status in Buddhism, like it's being presented here.
Mm-hmm. Anyways, continuing.
And when you go deeper into that information, you only see in black faces. You could go down into certain parts of Africa.
That's a freaking demon.
That's a Buddha. What are you talking about?
Yeah, with that angry face surrounded by hellfire.
It's what happens when a black person becomes a Buddha. It's like it's like their version of the Antichrist.
And it's holding a sword too.
Yeah,
Into that
because the anti-Buddha is violent.
You only see in black faces. You could go down into certain parts of Africa or down there. I forgot the name of the tribes, but in the Bantu, you could look at them and they have very high cheeks and their eyes are completely slanted. So you can tell where the Chinese people actually ascended from.
Gee, it's almost as if similar evolutionary pressures cause people to develop similar phenotypes.
I love all of the the TikTok ads in the description. That is exactly the tier of content I would associate this with.
Pretty much, yeah.
Anyway, let's continue.
Black
It's
Jesus,
an
let's
awful how
go.
they did us on religion, and our people tend to think that even those who feel that they know that white Americans have mistreated us, their grandchildren or great grandchildren still mistreating us in a lot of ways, they still believe, well, but nobody would lie about God, when that's not true. People who are trying to subjugate another people and turn them into slaves, not just physically but mentally, then they certainly would try to teach them that God looks like me.
A lot of people say it doesn't matter what Jesus looked like, it doesn't matter what God looked like or other deity. But the thing is, if it did not matter what Jesus looked like, why don't they show what the original paintings and pictures of Jesus look like? Why don't they show what the original paintings and pictures of the disciples look like? Because that's very important to know if it doesn't matter.
That's how
Michelangelo was
slavery
told by the
works.
Pope.
You're a free man. Nobody can control you until somebody who looks differently than you, until someone who looks differently than you comes along and says, no, God is someone who has my skin color. And then just like that, it's fucking may as well May as well have physically just put the handcuffs on him right there because it just breaks you. You can't recover from that.
Your entire ethnicity, which mind you consists of literally everyone that has ever lived on a single continent, can be destroyed irrecoverably for thousands of years just because someone decided to paint a god in the wrong color.
I know that's how my persona was created. I thought of myself as a person, and then I saw an anthro character one day, and I was like, "No, I'm forever different now."
Oh no, someone.
Anyway,
I remember one time I was putting on a t-shirt, and then I thought to myself, you know what? I'll put on a different t-shirt. And that changed my life in ways you can't possibly imagine. Like complete trajectory change.
if you'd worn the other T-shirt, you would have been given $1 million the moment that you walked out the door. But the moment that you touched the first bill, it would have clung to you like one of the suits from Changed, and you would have been changed.
Ah, hell, I missed out on becoming my first Sona.
And that's why it's money, is because they know you'd touch it.
I mean, it's a
Yeah,
clever
it's
disguise.
CIA money. Exactly. Yeah, it's you would just present me all that money. Yeah, it's like I'm gonna turn that down. That's what they're thinking.
And they're right. Until they tell me that in order to get the money I have to vote, in which case, no. Anyways, I'm gonna keep going.
To put the picture of the Holy Family on the roof of the chapel. Michelangelo said and the Pope specifically told him to make it European. Michelangelo explained to him that there are no models of a European Holy Family. And so he said, you'll think of something, and he did. He used his family.
We thought the only guy we had was the one that white people gave us, which was Jesus, okay? And he looked like them. And when we saw them, psychologically, we would transfer that was deity. If it
And once again, like you saw that guy who's saying like, "Oh, we have no models of the Holy Family." Then make one up, and you saw him like grinning manically. He knows he's trying to pull one up on you.
Yeah.
I'm telling you,
Well,
like,
and
I don't know how. I'm not totally sure how sincere everyone else in this series is, but if there was one person I would pin down as a liar 100%, it's him.
well, it's also he has to be consciously aware that he's full of shit because some of the claims that he makes, as you're gonna see, like if the ones that he's already made haven't given you this impression, just what he's gonna say later on is absolutely bonkers. He fuck, I almost it's in the next Hidden Colors, but it's so crazy that it stands out to me.
Yeah,
That's so
I know what you're referring to. Please let the
I'm not gonna
please
yeah.
let the audience discover it for themselves because
I'm not gonna spoil
it's
it.
like it's not a hot take. Like it's thermonuclear. Not in terms of just like how spicy it is, but just like in terms of like it's pure and utter insanity.
It comes completely the fuck out of nowhere in the context of the movie because the take right before it is just like a fairly like down to earth take about geopolitical relations between different states, and then he drops this like fucking schizo post. That's the only way I could describe it on the audience, and it's presented like it's equivalent to the last thing that was stated, and it just goes to the next scene, and it's not even questioned or elaborated on. It is it. I was when I saw it the first time, I was just Wow.
We
But
want.
that's the thing. That's not the only moment that's like that. It's like every couple of clips in this whole movie series is like that. It's amazing. I love Tariq Nasheed's movies so much, unironically. Not because I think that they're not because I take them seriously from an intellectual standpoint, just because it's amazing. They're some of the best documentaries ever made as far as entertainment value goes.
I would agree. Anyways,
It really was unimportant what he looked like. Then why didn't he look like the majority of the people on earth? Why would he look like the people who are the minority race on the entire earth? We're not the minority.
People always ask me, why do the black church not get rid of the white Jesus and put a blue black Jesus in place with a nappy head? Because black people would stop going.
Not only did they hide the color of religious figures throughout Europe, they would hide the colors of other very important people, especially royalty in Europe. A lot of old paintings in Europe, they clearly show African-looking deities. They show the Black Madonna and Child. This is all throughout Europe. They show black pictures of Jesus. They show African-looking disciples all over Europe.
I mean, everything that you're looking at in the Roman Catholic Church today is the exact copy of what they got from Egypt. The high priest, the regular priests, you got the cardinals, you got the bishops, and then you got the Pope at top. So you had the pharaoh, you had the high priest, you had the priests, and so you have the same type of categorization of people as they're placed in the temple, but their purposes and what they were telling was different.
When racism
I actually want to pause right there just because you'll notice that as he's explaining that the hierarchy and structure of the Roman Catholic Church is virtually identical to the structure and hierarchy of the religious organization of ancient Egypt, he doesn't do that smirking thing at all.
Well, and you'll also notice again that that was another point in which the narratives being created by of the different people being interviewed completely contradict each other, because I thought the Catholic Church was supposed to be the white people's influencing machine. Now, the Catholic Church is virtuous, and that's because it was actually based on organizational designs built by black people.
So, the epicenter of the conspiracy against the black people is the same place that was founded by black people. So they just became, I guess they just decided to become racists at some point. What happened? Did like some pope go around just like, you know what? I just don't like black people anymore. And then they're just like
exactly what happened.
very.
They took over a territory after too many of them were made by Yakub, and then they started making copies of themselves. And you know how you know what they say about copies making copies. And then eventually they created the Catholic Church. And then the Catholic Church was based on designs created by African people, which is where they learned how to touch children.
Oh no. We're not going there. We're not going there.
I'm joking. I'm joking. I'm joking about that one. That one. I'm being perfectly clear. That is 100% just something that I made up. And then because I thought it sounded funny, I'm not. Don't nobody get fucking mad at me over that. That was a joke.
JC Armitage says, if I didn't know any better, I would have thought this was made as a mockumentary. Yes, I would agree. Only problem is, I have no reason to believe that this is satirical. However, I am 30% sure that book breaking was satire.
I don't know what the hell buck breaking was because he got so emotionally invested in it. That's why I'm not exactly sure if I would agree with that. he invested so much money in commissioning the art, and the art is like it's so obviously fetishistic in the way that it's signaling and the way it's drawn. I and the claims that are being presented in it, it's very much a serious like claim about the nature of societies being conveyed. It's just it's just amazing and completely insane.
Just to give a brief description, these pictures were clearly done in an art style that's more modern, probably done by like artists he actually paid to, like he commissioned specifically for this movie, but they're presented in such a way as to suggest that these are all images of things that actually happened in the antebellum South. I'm not going to describe the situation, but you can leave your user imagination. However, they all, despite being made by different artists, have very, very, very similar elements, visual elements, that gives the impression that when Nasheed commissioned these, he gave a very specific prompt that was given to all of these artists, and they all received the same prompt.
And the prompt was make stuff that's designed to satisfy this list of kinks.
And he had one.
That's
There's one kink in particular that I'm not going to describe, just to be safe. Like it's not bad. Like the whole thing is like at worst softcore porn, but it is just like.
then it stopped. Sorry.
But it is just like it's something you don't want to. I'm just going to play it safe here and just say like we're not showing that.
It stopped appealing to Tariq in that way after he commissioned it, and then he just looked at the collection of pictures he had and decided, you know what? I can make up some more bullshit for another movie.
Oh yeah, easy money. Anyways, let's continue here.
Rose, because racism was a system, and prior to the system of racism evolving as a necessary instrument for the maintenance and protection of the European genotype, Europeans, for many intents and purposes, I would say just about worshiped African people.
First 3 popes were black.
You had one named Saint Victor, you had one named Saint Gelasius, you had one pope named Saint Matthiades. There was another brother
So
named
that's
Saint
the
Benedict,
reason
who was
slavery happened, filthy.
Because they worship
It's
black
because
people.
it's because all white people have like a Madonna whore complex directed towards all black people. That's the reason why.
I feel
We secretly worship and want to emulate them, but because we're not them, that makes us angry and want to destroy them.
I feel like that's just Tariq Nasheed projecting his fetishes.
Yeah, again, that just feels like another moment, especially with like buck breaking being a thing now. That just I would agree with your assessment basically.
a patron saint in Europe, well known throughout Italy.
Militatus was a black pope. Militatus was the pope during the Council of Nicaea.
And we've had these brothers who were worshipped throughout Europe and Italy, and we don't talk about it in America, but they're well known in Europe. You have one brother, Saint Maurice, who's a well-known martyr and a religious figure throughout Europe, and you see his statues all over the place.
Many of those who early on.
So in Europe, these saints who were African, I don't know their history, so I can't say one way or the other. I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt here. But if their history is actively being suppressed, why are they still revered and venerated as saints and historical popes?
Yeah, I'm gonna go Yeah, I'm just going to outright admit that I don't exactly, I'm not exactly knowledgeable about the topics being referred to, so I can't really give an informed take on them. But but I would agree that there's exactly that question that gets brought up within the narrative of what they're even claiming. Okay, well, if this is all being actively suppressed, then how come this isn't exactly, this is widely available information that has direct continuity with concepts that within the existing propaganda model of states frame them as virtuous characters, or frame the events, or frame those characters within historical events as having a virtuous role if you take the propaganda model's narrative at face value.
Also, Grampo did bring up a good point in the comments. One of those posts presided over the Council of Nicaea, which wasn't that the one that declared Gnosticism to be heresy?
Yeah, which wasn't exactly intending on getting into that.
I mean,
Because yeah, that's a topic. That's a topic that, admittedly, like everybody in the back alley has been talking about it more recently, but I admittedly haven't really been like studying much of the actual literature of the Gnostics, because like that started around the time that I began having my issues like 2 weeks ago, and I'm not getting into that. But anyway, what were you gonna say, Heretic?
I was just pointing out that I would think that like having one of the more interesting approaches to the Hermetic method that exists in the world, as well as having a significantly more sophisticated understanding of the cosmology of Christianity that exists, just simply be wiped off the face of the earth because it's quote unquote
Well,
heresy
yeah.
is a I I don't want to make any propositional statements, but I would not regard that as a good thing.
It makes me dislike Judeo-Christianity about as much as I dislike the concept of political ideology. I will say that.
Yeah. Anyways, continuing.
Helped to formulate what is modern day Christianity in Greece and Rome were also African.
When you look at Christianity, you're dealing with the Amen priesthood that's coming directly out of ancient Kemet. You're dealing with the rites and rituals of Osiris, the passions of Osiris, the idea of the resurrection of the dead and his son coming forward, Heru, as his living testament to his life. Aset, who the Greeks call Isis, is the essence of who Mary is. Nebetet, who is her sister, is who Mary Magdalene is. So that when you look at Christianity, I mean, even when you look at the word Chris or Chorast, you're dealing with Chares. Cha means spirit and res means to rise. The Romans learned the Passion of Osiris through the Greek. And the Greeks learned it through the Kemites or the Africans from Egypt. So that it was just a retelling of the same story, superimposing things that they thought they knew. And that becomes what we today call
Continuity there is not
Judaism,
ethnicity, it's the Hermetic method.
You should go into that. You'll know more about that than I do.
So the Hermetic method I describe it as a method because it's not a belief system or a philosophy, but within specific systems of spirituality, at least as it's commonly understood, it's treated internally as like a system of rules for understanding how to conceive of your thoughts basically internally in a way where by implication of doing so your brain will react to internalizing that concept, even if doing so doesn't really have an association with the practical environment. This can be better understood in the modern day as you could probably tell just by how I was describing it and how I sort of came to understand it, despite not really being familiar with any of the literature, it's basically just using your own internal thought process for the purpose of getting your brain to alter how it perceives your senses or how certain functions of your brain work by using your brain like a computer because of the fact that the brain is analogous to the function of a digital computer, which is why that's possible. And I learned how to do that not by studying spirituality, but by studying MK Ultra and how large language models work and comparing that to the way neural plasticity functions in the brain. So I'm still very much coming to understand it myself, but basically what I came to that's how I came to understand the Hermetic method despite not really studying it from the perspective of esotericism or mysticism. I kind of learned about it in a really weird backwards way and thus would explain it differently than probably a lot of other people would.
I mean, it does make sense. You can see some of the effects of it, and thus you're able to, for want of a better term, reverse engineer it from its results, since you're able to study its chain of implications, and thus you can deduce what it can, or what must be true, only to then discover that such a methodology already exists. Kind of like what we did during the HOP essay, where we reverse engineered discourse ethics from argumentation ethics.
But why Gnosticism and a lot of these ancient texts in the Hermetic method are of such interest? Well, if you approach what is being described the way that you would approach creating altered states through the method that I described, like if you approach what's being described in terms of functionally trying to describe something in nature without what is literally written being a proposition, like it's supposed to be likening something to a function that can be observed and studied. When you approach these texts that way, you understand basically that a lot of these magics or these what are described as spells are actually descriptions, repeatable descriptions of altered states that you can create before this context was really known about. So my perspective has sort of become, I'm developing it, but the conclusion that I've come to based on what I've studied about the brain is something to the effect of old systems of spirituality are ye old attempts to describe what was observed in studying MK Ultra.
Yeah, I still gotta do a lot more of studying that stuff on my end, but so far a lot of the stuff seems quite interesting. Anyways, I'm just gonna continue on.
Mechanism that comes directly out of the river Hapi or Nile. And that is why Moses himself was said to be initiated into the priesthood of ancient Egypt.
In fact, today, if you were to go to Africa and talk to the children who've been Christianized, they will tell you that their ancestors covenanted with devils, and this is why black people are in the condition they are today. So turn to Christianity, and of course you turn to the oppressor's religion, and then you eat the gruel that they give you, and at the bottom it says Jesus saved you. Of course, you're conditioning that person for another 1,000 years.
The falsehood of Christianity has taken a toll on black relationships because really when women are taught, or women and men, but when you're taught as a female that God and Jesus is white, you're going to look at whites as somewhat of a savior figure. And you're going to look at the men in your life a little differently.
Try to just work on that more. We need to stop going to church every Sunday trying to get along with them and try to get along with the people at home. Some people leave home mad, but they go to church and go in there and then they love the
If
pastor and they
God
love
is
Jesus
drawn
because
as a
there's no
white
account.
man, that's gonna turn me into an incel.
Is that how that
Because
works?
all the black women are gonna be looking for white pedigree males.
That seems. I
Oh
mean,
my God,
I've
how much we've talked about. I would legitimately be amazed if this stream stays up on YouTube with how much we've talked about ethnicity.
well, we'll find out at some point. I imagine that there's going to be quite
Yeah,
a lot of
I
comments that
guess.
are going to be taken out of context, nonetheless. Oh my goodness, it's going to turn out
Which is great because
sorry.
I'm not taking this seriously at all.
Fair
Like
enough.
if I were taking this seriously, I would have actually studied a lot of the specific historical claims that are being cited. But the people that we're responding to are making claims like there was an ancient African colonization campaign of Korea that resulted in the creation of the Kingdom of Japan when Ethiopia deported Koreans to the Japanese island.
Seem,
Like you're fucking
seems
you
legit.
don't this is exactly why I suggested responding to this for this stream is because it's just stupid and fun and we needed something stupid and fun.
I agree. Now, JC Armitage asks, "Am I the only one who's thinking that these paintings might be AI generated?" I don't think so, just
Well,
simply because, while AI image generation probably did exist at the time this was made, which is like 2012, if I recall correctly.
yeah, I was gonna say the problem with that would be that this came out in 2012. So, can't be.
Photoshop definitely existed. However, I don't. I'm actually willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, but it's also worth noting that just because you're taking the original images doesn't mean you're necessarily taking it in context, because there are a lot of like old medieval art that depict people as having dark skin simply because the dyes that they were using at the time for human skin, when they age, they blacken.
Yes, we have to use this dye to represent skin color for economic reasons. People in the future, yeah, in life they had that skin color. That translates roughly to if people 400 or 500 years from now looked at The Simpsons and were like, why did people in the 1980s have yellow skin and nobody talked about it?
I can promise you that's going to happen
Hey,
if these people have
is
their
it
way
because
anyway.
of all is it the nuclear power plant that gave him that, all that skin color?
I mean,
Gave him all that skin color.
you saw the nuclear power plant. That's like the pipes are literally dripping the green stuff.
Yeah,
So
yeah. They're hiding the fact that those existed everywhere, and that's why everybody was yellow. And they had to quickly dismantle them, and that's why white people became so I don't know pasty. It was recovered that no. That's where gingers came from. Gingers were a byproduct of the fallout.
it also might have just been the resurgence of the mimes stealing everybody's color. Yeah, they keep them on standby in these little boxes, and when there's too much color going around, they just deploy them to make everything like
The
modern.
Yeah, the mimes created the gingers to be their vanguard. That's what they do with some of the color. They take the color and then they put it into like a an android, and that's what happens. They end up turning into a ginger person. and most of the time they're cool, which is why you can have friendships with them, and they're just like it's just like talking to any other person. But you mentioned the secret mime color erasure campaign, and it'll be like you got a wrong answer in Baldi's Basics. You gotta you gotta run, and that's the only thing that'll calm them down.
Even though you better hope that you don't get too many problems wrong. Otherwise, very bad things are gonna happen. Anyways, I'm gonna continue.
Accountability. Jesus ain't gonna say, pull your dress down, come in off the street, go clean up the house. You know, Jesus ain't gonna tell them that. And if he do, they ain't gonna listen to that.
There is only one race on the planet, and that is the human race. And because of biological climatology, this race was born, nurtured, sustained, civilized,
Bruh.
educated in Africa.
What?
What he just fucking said.
There's only one race,
just
the human
said.
race, and
In hidden colors. And then he just went on from there to say, and Africa civilized them and made them a separate race. What
Yep.
the fuck even?
well,
But
the-
but what makes someone an African, according to him, is the fact that they're black. What?
I mean, it's pretty obvious what the implication is. Europeans aren't human,
Yeah.
therefore it's
But
okay. Therefore, like
that-
it's okay to do literally anything to them.
I get that, but yes, I'm thinking about it. Sorry. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I forgot. I'm not supposed to do that. Alright.
Grambo points out, if we are the human race, why is there a need for black validation unless you wish or desire special treatment?
That's exactly the reason that stands out. It's amazing that those two sentences are side by side with each other. How does one sentence conclude with there's only one race, the human race, and then the thought that follows that is, yeah, Africans are the best race.
Well, no. The best race is me, and I'm in first place.
I'm no, it's I almost I'll say it. No, it's me because my fur's white.
Fair enough. Anyways,
Africa. And Dr. Clark teaches us that after they got their show together,
I had to think about that one for a second because I thought that might have been too spicy for you too.
now there's that shit-eating grin again. He's trying to pull one up over us.
and Dr. Clark teaches us that after they got their show together, then they took it on the road.
The origin of the
he just
name
made
Europe
two contradictory
comes from
statements.
A Phoenician goddess named
He
Europa.
made a contradictory
So-
statement as evidence to support the other.
Mm-hmm.
The origin of the name
It
Europe
wasn't a
has
contradiction.
an African origin because the Phoenicians, we're still dealing with black African people, the Canaanites and all that. When we talk about Phoenicians, we're still talking about black folks.
The first Europeans were a group of Africans called the Grimaldi who had migrated from Africa to Europe between 40 and 60,000 years ago. And in the process of evolution, many of them lost the Africoid genotype and phenotypical features and then went on to look more European-esque. You even see in pre-racist Europe, Africans and Europeans living side by side.
Africoid.
Africoid. Sometimes, like, this is just a gold mine for new vocabulary terms. This is
Yeah,
actually-
just making up random shit in order to make the claims that are being made to sound more sophisticated than they actually are.
So in 2025, what would be the response in the mainstream political economy to people referring to this month as Africoid History Month?
It's People of Color Month. That's what they would say.
POC Month.
It's
But we hid the colors.
Not anymore. They're not hiding anymore. Which is why we've also got at Walmart, we're gonna start putting out separate drinking fountains that are labeled people of color so that they're visible and their identity is respected.
Well, you know what they do? You know what else they sell at Walmart? Curtains.
A black person goes up to the drinking fountain that's not labeled person of color, and the Walmart security guard. Hey, what are you doing, you stupid person of color? That's not your drinking fountain.
Go into the drinking fountain that's covered by a curtain. We need to hide you.
we can't let you do that. They throw they throw like one of those tarps that police put on people that are streaking. It's to hide the wrong color being in the place it's not supposed to be. It's required to maintain the social order, heretic.
Well, of course. I mean, you've read page 173 of Democracy, the God That Failed.
Yeah, it's exactly why they're doing that. It's because if they don't, then everybody inside Walmart's gonna see the fact that there's a black person doing that, and they're gonna be like, hey, why the fuck is Walmart property? And then there's gonna be a riot, and they just take everything.
I hate it when that happens.
Mixing that up gets people so mixed up that they don't even know they're Americans anymore. And then they forget property exists.
Aw, I hate it. I'm okay with that, though.
Fucking black person drinking from the wrong water fountain's basically the same thing as a communist insurrection, heretic.
Frick! Anyways, let's keep going.
In fact, a lot of European families have a African background that they don't like to acknowledge.
Queen Charlotte, she was a woman of African descent, and this is well known throughout Europe. There was another guy, King Charles. Many people say that he has an African origin as well, that he has African ancestry. King Charles was referred to as the black boy growing up because he was so dark. And they have pubs over in Europe now called the Black Boy Pub. Or the
Yeah, because that's clearly what they're referring to when they came up with the Black Boy restaurant.
They were thinking of King Charles.
Clearly. They literally can't be referring to anyone else.
There's a
Black Boy Inn
minstrel on the advertisement for the restaurant. But no, that's what they were thinking of.
which refers to King Charles. There's also knowledge about King Charles being a descendant of the de' Medici family. The de' Medici family out of Europe, out of Italy, they're known to have that African bloodline as well. One of the de' Medicis, Alessandro de' Medici, who was a ruler in Italy, you look at pictures of him, this dude looks like Ryan Leslie. So you could see that African bloodline running through.
I don't know who Ryan Leslie was.
Presumably another black celebrity, because that's the tier of that's the tier of substance we're dealing with.
Probably.
Payton looks like a black celebrity.
I mean, I will say that the painting does look black. I don't know if that's accurate or not. I wouldn't say it's impossible, but you know.
Take any painting from the Renaissance era. Yo, this guy looks like Will Smith.
Although I will say, it's like you can look at the art style. That's clearly at least Renaissance era. So that's not like the founding of Europe or anything like that. This is like, I don't know, a wealthy African family or something are able to gain power in Italy, which actually strikes me as strange because Italy as a political entity did not exist until like relatively recently in history. I mean, the United States of America as a country is older than Italy. I don't remember when they became a unified country, but it was like right before or shortly, I think it's like shortly before World War One. So you having it being like Italian king was probably like the equivalent of being a count or a baron. You kind of just like held a dominion over a relatively small territory. I don't remember how how the political structure in Italy worked at the time.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you. I couldn't give you an informed take on the topic.
Yeah, but I'm just recalling that probably not as big deal as he wants it to be. He's just picking and choosing.
This dude looks like Ryan Leslie.
All right.
So you could see that African
Continue.
bloodline running through a lot of these people of royal descent. There were blacks in Scotland. There was one black Scottish king named Kenneth the Dub. There are figurines and carvings of black Scots.
It's the Celtic Druid.
Because that's clearly what that is.
But yeah, Scottish people were black.
African priesthood that had gone into Europe
Druids were black.
and had
Well,
inhabited the islands of what we
as
today call
a-
Ireland.
As
Inhabited
a spiritual movement, it was an all-black one.
Apparently.
what we today call so-called Great Britain, Scotland, and Wales. It inhabited Holland, inhabited Denmark, was all up in there.
Many Greeks and
Do you have any proof at all? Or are you just throwing stuff out there?
Yeah, Scandinavians were black too.
Everybody was black. It's like who I mean, it's not the point now. It's like people who are watching have already seen like the numerous ways that this narrative contradicts itself, and it's just like the overarching narrative contradicts itself because it's like everybody was black, but white people are oppressing black people, but white people don't exist because all the white people are black. So who's oppressing us?
Yeah. Europeans are black, and African states are responsible for setting up European states or making them successful. But at the same time, yeah, it's black
Romans
people
were
are being
biracial.
oppressed by white people, and white people exist.
to use a modern term, which they didn't use back then, they were biracial. Their look, okay, could not readily on the surface be absolutely identified as European or black because many of them was of a biracial stock.
Hannibal Barca, the great military genius, he comes from an African background. In a lot of movies and on television shows, they will try to Europeanize and whiten up the image of Hannibal Barca, but he was definitely...
I don't think that's from a movie. I'm just saying.
Oh yes, and when there's pictures of them that explicitly depict them with features of a European ethnic group, that's just fake.
Definitely a man of
Why
African
can't I
descent.
dismiss all of the other
there are even
pictures
coins
presented
throughout
as evidence on the exact same
Europe.
grounds?
In North Africa of Hannibal, showing him. Many historians say that there's a coin of a black man and there's an elephant on the other side, and people say that that is Hannibal.
Yes, Hannibal Barcus.
I don't know. Could it be? Maybe. I don't know. But at this point, it's like all they really do is just like throw forward some conjecture and then hoping that their jump cutting and gish galloping is going to be enough to prevent people from being able to examine this information critically.
Was one of the greatest warriors that ever lived. And what he did, what he accomplished,
I don't know much to say about
is
that.
now still a matter of study in all of the world's military colleges. What he did by bringing together, he had the power to bring different factions together. He had different the Celts, he had the African horsemen, he had different types of armies. So when he went against Rome, they didn't know who to fight because there were so many different styles of warfare. And when you had such a genius and a brilliant man at 22, actually orchestrating after his father, of course, taught him everything that he knew, brought him on campaigns to teach him. He came back and actually took his father's genius to the next level. Septimus Severus was African, and he was the one that actually took the fight, took the Roman fight up north into England.
The Russian language that we know today can be attributed to a black man named Alexander Pushkin. He created the modern Russian language because they were speaking French and other types of language there.
Had it not been for someone like Alexander...
Do you have any proof for any of these claims whatsoever?
No. Okay, that's the one that I actually do understand. The history of the Cyrillic languages, and that is hilariously wrong. The hint is in the name, Cyrillic language, as in Cyril the monk.
I wonder who could have come up
In
with
his
that.
aesthetic practice. And, yeah, Cyril was a white person.
Well, no,
This all took place in Eastern Europe, so...
Well, you know he was black because he invented something, and the only reason anything was ever invented ever was because black people did it.
Slavs were black.
Yes. And we know this because we found this one piece of art that showed a Slavic person with large lips. And the only reason that they would have large lips is because they're black.
I could know more about the character of Cyril, admittedly, but yeah, I know that's laughably wrong. That's like claiming that the English language exists because of William Shakespeare.
And the Pushkin, Russians would be speaking French today.
A lot of people say that people like Leonardo da Vinci and Sir Isaac Newton,
Anyway,
they created a lot of inventions in Europe.
Keep in mind, you're like several seconds behind me, so when you ask me to get the video playing, I'm usually already playing it.
That's right.
But
I'd probably just say I'm playing it now, which I am.
a lot of their inventions can be attributed to the African presence that was in Europe, because there was a strong African presence and they were bringing in science and mathematics, so that's where all that came from.
Leonardo da Vinci, Galileo, all of them studied with African people. They didn't come up with this. And when people talk about Leonardo da Vinci, the only question that I have as it relates to Leonardo da Vinci is, who was his teacher? Who taught Leonardo da Vinci brain anatomy? Who taught him about the airplane? Who taught him this? Tell me, who was his teacher? They can't tell you who the teacher is, because if they told you who the teacher is, they would have to tell you they were black.
Marco Polo.
What?
It's black people, of course.
Because everybody knows that Leonardo da Vinci could literally just go down to Ghana or to Ethiopia and then just ask someone about brain anatomy, ask some 11-year-old kid, and they'd give you a full college course on it because they just know.
Yeah.
Their genetic memory is so powerful that they have knowledge of many insane and esoteric fields of study beyond what even modern day college professors could even conceive of.
It's their genetic autism.
It's too powerful.
anytime that anyone does anything that is worth noting, that was the inner black of their genetic memory coming out. That's how all of these narratives work.
They're melanin
And whenever
activated.
good, yeah, it's these traits are defined by their skin color, but also their genetic memory can activate at any moment, which can change the way that the norms of their behavior works, and that can happen to anyone at any time.
Polo, he was considered to be one of the first Europeans to make it over into Eastern Asia.
Yeah, it's
And what
actually
Marco
insane.
Polo did, he took something known as the Silk Road into Asia. And the Silk Road was already established by Africans and other Aboriginal people. And the Silk Road, they would travel this road and they would trade garments. And this is why Italy has always been known to be a fashion mecca. People always talk about the quality of Italian clothes. But when we talk about Italian fashion, where did they get that fashion sense from? See, the Italians got that fashion sense from the Moors and the Africans that went in there. They brought those silk garments and all those fly clothes into Europe. Even the concept of alligator shoes, which is attributed to Italy, the thing is, alligators are not indigenous to Italy. Crocodiles are not indigenous to Italy. So where did they get those alligator skins and those crocodile skins? They
From
got those from Africa.
Africa,
The Moors
brought most of the silk through the Silk Road into Europe.
Was there even a Silk Road route into or touching
I
Africa?
was I was gonna say, yeah. Did the Silk Road? I'd have to look at it on a map again, because yeah, I'm not even sure if the Silk Road connected to Africa, but yeah, they're claiming that the people in Africa were the main suppliers of silk on the Silk Road, which ran from Europe into Southeast Asia.
Where the actual silkworms are indigenous too. Therefore,
Oh yeah,
the only place on Earth you could get silk would be in Asia.
but remember, they're all Asians are black because everybody's black.
Everybody's black except the
It's tech-
Europeans who are also black.
so technically it's accurate because everybody is black, which means they're African. But at the same time, everybody's black, which means that this could be said of anyone from any continent, which means that it's also true for people from Asia. So Asians are also Africans.
The only people who the only people who aren't Africans are Europeans until they are also black. So it's like,
And because, sorry, what were you gonna say?
no, it's good.
But yeah, because Asians are Africans, that means that it's technically true that Africans were supplying the silk through the Silk Road. Don't you see?
Oh, by the way, I'm looking in comments right now. Pushkin is someone who Grambo is elaborating on. Alexander Sergeyevich Pushkin was a Russian poet, playwright, and novelist of the Romantic era. He is considered by many to be the greatest Russian poet, which means that yes, he was the William Shakespeare of Russia.
Yeah, it's why I made that comparison. I'm
Well,
not saying they aren't a significant figure. But the claim that was made is that they're the reason that the Russian language exists, which is not how language works, and is also just one of those claims where you could do a little bit of fucking studying the topic. I didn't even particularly care. Like, I don't even know who the monk Cyril is off the top of my fucking head. I just know enough about it, just getting information and data out of the grapevine that, and also just I understand how languages develop. And I just know that that claim's obviously not fucking valid.
hmm Anyways, I'm just going to continue here.
And there's a lot of moments like that where
click
you
the wrong
don't
thing.
even really need to have looked into it. Where you don't even really need to have looked into what they're talking about. It's just because of, in order for the claim they're making to be valid, it would require you to take at face value assumptions about the nature of society that you could just demonstrate is not valid or are not valid.
Yeah, I'm going to continue.
Brought that in. And the players wear shoes called Maury Gators. Those are some of the most popular shoes around among players, the Maury Gators. The word Maury is a variation of the word Moorish. So we have to know all this stuff.
Mauri, Mauri, is a permutation of Moorish, is an Moor. I think you're reaching. I'm just
It sounds similar. That's how phonetics work.
it can't just have been someone's name or have some other kind of origin. Maybe there was like a region of Italy called Mori, where this is originated from, a small town. Or maybe even the name of a pet. There's like an infinite number of ways this could have possibly emerged. This is just another example of baseless conjecture. But anyways, I think we actually do want to start wrapping it up here. Mostly just because I'm becoming exhausted.
I was about to suggest the same thing. But yeah, we'll definitely, I think we'll be continuing these streams whenever we feel like going forward, just whenever we feel like doing a dumb stream and we didn't have another stream planned. Because I honestly really enjoyed this, but yeah, we made it a half hour in, and it's a 2-hour movie, and there's like 7 of these fucking movies, so we're gonna be doing this for a while.
Oh yeah, it's gonna take us a while to go through.
All right, if you guys enjoyed watching the stream, well, we're definitely gonna be doing more of these, and also I'm really happy to hear that if that's the case. But yeah, we're gonna go ahead and wrap things up and end the stream here. So we'll be seeing you guys pretty soon. And also, yeah, we're gonna get stuff we're gonna probably be getting stuff going with the server pretty soon here. I'm not gonna give a prognosis, but yeah, we have plans to get stuff, and I've been saying, God damn it, I've been saying that the last couple of streams, but now we're actually acting on things directly. Anyway, we're gonna go ahead and we'll be talking about it more openly fairly soon here. That's the main difference. But yeah, we're gonna go ahead and end the stream. See you guys later.
Alright, see ya. Bye.